They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, nor spake, nor moved their eyes. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise. Welcome back to Magic Gathering Strat. I'm Wall of Ice Cream, and here is another video about the 25 artists of Alpha. We stopped on the M's a couple months ago last time. Haven't had a real chance to start out again, but it's Halloween. And Halloween is October 31st. It's the time of making jack-o'-lanterns to give thanks to Jack, who scared Satan up a tree and carved a cross on it. And Satan, in exchange for having him erase the cross, did not allow Jack into hell. However, Jack was so evil that Satan personally showed up to send him to hell. So he couldn't go to hell and he couldn't go to heaven, so he's walking the earth, and let's all make pumpkins carved in Jack's face, whatever he is. I did Homestar Runner characters. You can do whatever. If you don't know anything I'm talking about, well, let's just stay for the pretty pictures. So let's talk about three artists, starting with the letter M. Menges, Marfers, and Ron Spencer. Menges, as I showed in my other video, he signed my Swords of Plowshares picture, and I also had the lucky part about Spencer. He signed my Skyshroud Poacher in gold. So I met two of the three. So that's about all I can say about them. They sell mouse pads. Sentinel Druid is the favorite card of Menges. He's very proud of it. I had two Sentinel Druids signed by him. They're from Antiquities, extremely hard to find. For Ron Spencer, I couldn't really say what his favorite card was. But you can see they do lots of spooky, scary stuff. So just a warning right now, if you don't like pictures of walking skeletons, I know that the Chinese are kind of skittish about that. I talked to a grad student at my university about it, and he gave me some politically charged reasons, which I won't tell in a YouTube video of that sort of thing, so I won't get into that. But if you are, say you're below the age of 7 and you're scared about people covered in pox or pockmarks or creepy stuff or ghosts, if you're scared of ghosts, and just close the video, have a happy Halloween dressing up as your favorite Smurf or whatever character. So starting out with Menges. Menges, an Alpha, drew Aspect of Wolf, Black Knight, a Bog Wraith, Consecrate Land, Grizzly Bears, Merfolk of the Pearl Trident, Mons Goblin Raiders, Raised Dead, Rock Hydra, Scavenging Ghoul, Sea Serpent, Swords of Plowshares, War Mammoth, Water Elemental, and Zombie Master. So one of the best parts I like about Menges is his pictures about death. Black Knight is a classic, powerful creature. For 2 black mana, it's a 2/2 first strike protection from white. People wanted to add in 4 Black Knights and 4 White Knights to the deck. The problem is that if you tried putting in double white and double black in the same deck, you have to either start with a Plains or a Swamp. So if you start with a Plains, you can't turn 2 play a Black Knight. If you start with a Swamp, you can't play a turn 2 White Knight. So it forces people to play with dual lands, and people kind of got hooked on dual lands since they came out in Alpha. And they're still hooked on dual lands now. The price is absolutely stupendous, but it starts with color dualities like this. Aspect of Wolf used to be in Rabid Wombat decks. 4 mana creature that keeps getting bigger every single creature enchantment you put on it. Now there's better ways. There's Core Spirit Dancer. It only costs 2 mana and does the same thing as Rabid Wombat. So Rabid Wombat decks don't really exist anymore. Consecrate Land. This is probably the hardest card to code. It's still not coded into CardForge as of this moment. If you go to slightlymagic.net and try to download CardForge, you can't play with this card. I've never played with it. Look at this Bog Wraith. I've played with tons of Bog Wraiths. I played lots of Chandelar 2009, 2010. If you've seen any of my Let's Play videos, they're on my channel, and there's a couple on Magic Gathering Strat's channel too. But Jeff Menges just has a knack of death. There's this middle of winter. There's dead trees, there's dead ground, and there's a Bog Wraith after you. That's Swamp Walk. there isn't that many walking creatures anymore, and playing with Momer Basics, they tell you to stick with swamps and forests, or swamps and mountains, excuse me, because there are a lot of forest walk creatures, such as Jaguar Warriors from Legends. But it's not really true these days. There aren't that many land walking creatures. And it could be that your strategy is playing 5-color Momer Basics these days, these last couple of years. It's hard to just retry the strategy. There's a lot more cards these days. So it's difficult to analyze such an enormous amount of Momer Basics cards on Magic the Gathering Online to see if this is still true in Magic the Gathering Online 4.0 as it was in 3.0. Grizzly Bears is named bears. Every single, any mana plus any closed mana 2/2 creature is a bear. Death and Taxes are just, they call them hate bears, because they're 2-mana creatures, and it's 2 power and 2 toughness, and does something. Like, your opponent can't shuffle his library, or his or her library. Bears is like the synonymous names. It just hasn't been catching on. Like, people don't call 3/3s hill giants. They don't call 4/4s like Duckwood boars. They don't call them boars or anything. But somehow bears has caught on as just the quintessential name for any 2/2 creature is a bear. Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. There's better cards these days. Mon's Goblin Raiders and Merfolk of the Pearl Trident were the de facto 1-mana vanilla 1/1s. Vanilla means that there's just no card text. This is all flavor text. There's no rules text. There's nothing. This is going to be completely blank. This could be a full art card. 1/1 vanilla. It's terrible, but this was a lot of players, my first Magic deck could be 4 Merfolk of the Pearl Trident plus 4 Lords of Atlantis, and 4 Sunken Cities. Sunken Cities are actually legal in Magic the Gathering Online Pauper now. They reunited the paper Pauper with Magic the Gathering Pauper mid-2019, so if you have some Sunken Cities, go try to play in aggro blue deck. What else? Mon's Goblin Raiders. The Goblin version of this, I predicted early on and just revised. With Goblins and Goblin King, I knew there was going to be more Goblins because all of this is just so J.R.R. Tolkien cards. A lot of this early Magic, they don't try to go to all these Thakalos and core stuff, Meta Thran. That's all from Magic lore that they were developed, from the ground up. But before they had all these weird names for creatures, Gatekeepers of Ubulsar, they used Tolkien-esque creatures, like goblins and elves and dwarves. And either a goblin could be printed that's exactly the same as Mon's Goblin Raiders, where goblins' power level is the same. They could print something weaker, where goblins' power level is the same, or they could print a better goblin than Mon's Goblin Raiders, which would increase the power of goblins. And as we've seen as the years have passed, goblins have become a playable deck in Modern. Goblins have been a playable deck in Extended, and same thing with Merfolk. Merfolk Pearl Tridents are actually a playable deck in Vintage, if you can believe it. So just flip a coin. Is the next set have a better goblin than any of the goblins before, or it doesn't? And whenever the coin flips heads, goblin always wins. Raised Dead. Happy Halloween. Here's a picture of a skeleton. Yikes. Put target creature from your graveyard to your hand. They printed a lot of these. I like these, what's the word for, I don't even remember the words for Raised Dead these days. It's unentomb, disentomb, that's it. There's Disentomb now, which is the same as Raised Dead, but I will still call Disentomb Raised Dead. Rock Hydra. It's, on my Unlimited Rock Hydra, I was offered, a dime for it. 2 or 3 years ago. It was in the buy list of Adventures On or Blackborder.com, and no, you can't have my Rock Hydra. I don't care if it's garbage. They're just offering 10 cents for it just to see if people want to complete their set of Unlimited. And I'm keeping on to it until I die. So, there you go. Scavenging Ghoul. So I asked Mingus, I specifically went to Mingus at Gen Con and said, where are your Scavenging Ghouls? The art is amazing. And he says, Gen Con doesn't allow me to have all of my cards. Mingus just has a ton of cards that he's illustrated, and he just has like one book that you can take out a card and have him sign, or you can just bring your own and he'll sign them for free. He had no Scavenging Ghouls. To explain why Scavenging Ghouls is 4 mana, I have to explain why like Otherden Troll is 4 mana. Because Otherden Troll is red 2, it's a 2/2, and for 1 red you can regenerate it. And in early Magic days, regeneration meant that this card costs 1 more. Because what happens is, if you play a creature turn 2, your opponent lightning bolts it. If you play a creature turn 3, your opponent lightning bolts it. If you play a creature turn 4, your opponent lightning bolts it. And that's how some Magic games go. But if you have Otherden Troll and you play it turn 3, your opponent lightning bolts it, and you don't have your 1 red mana to regenerate it. So you play your Otherden Troll turn 4, your opponent lightning bolts it, you regenerate it, your opponent lightning bolts it again, but it's still a 2-for-1. It's like a draw 2 spell for 4 mana. It's like an inspiration or divination spell. Scavenging Ghoul's 4 mana because it's 0 colorless mana to regenerate it. So it's technically the same as Otherden Troll, although when a lot of people see the card, they don't see it that way. It actually becomes like 15th pick draft chaff. That's just how Magic cards were back then. Sea Serpent. There's like a 6/6 for the same casting cost. This is, can't attack unless you control an island. They call it Sea Home now, but they had a longer word for it. I'm wondering if Magic the Gathering will ever have, like, every single one of its phrases, like, not just, like, Sea Home, but if they will actually say, like, mill an opponent for 4 on the card, instead of putting the top 4 cards of the opponent's library into his or her graveyard. That would be pretty cool. It's just like when it comes to play mill 4 or something. Swords of Plowshares. It's on my... It's... I think... Let's see. Mark Rosewater said Swords of Plowshares was a mistake. White is the 3rd best color for destroying creatures. Black is the best. Black can just murder any single creature for 3 mana. And green cannot destroy creatures. It's the worst. It has like roots, which for 4 mana can make a creature like not attack and block. White is a little better with like pacifism. Is like 2 mana. Creature can't attack or block, but doesn't kill a creature. It can still use its abilities. So you can use 3 for an arrest, but it still doesn't put a creature in the graveyard. But for some reason, White has a card that's even better than Terror or Dark Banishing or Murder or any of those other cards. And this was a complete mistake. A basic problem in Magic the Gathering is printing 1 mana cards. If you make it cost 2 mana, maybe no one will play it. So what's best if it costs 1.5 mana. But Magic the Gathering has no way of making cards cost 1.5 mana. So that would have been overpowered. And in fact, a lot of vintage legacy play is basically playing cards that Wizards of the Coast thought it would be okay at 1 mana because if Brainstorm was 2 mana, then people wouldn't play Brainstorm. Where were we? Okay, so War Mammoth. War Mammoth actually went well with Elephant Graveyard from Arabian Nights. It's taps to regenerate an elephant or a mammoth. There never was like a solid elephant or mammoth theme, and even today, if you had elephant graveyards, building an elephant or mammoth deck doesn't really work these days. The 3/3 for trample for green 3 was actually pretty good. It actually separates green as the best creature color, where a hill giant was red 3 and a 3/3 for green 3. You can add trample to it. I actually had an elephant graveyard, but my dad sold it. Let's see, Water Elemental. 5/4 elemental deck. If you play this against this a lot in Chandelar. Turn 1 you could do Island Mana Vault. Turn 2 Islands, tap the Mana Vault for 3 colorless, play Water Elemental, and put your opponent on a quick clock. You can do the same thing with Air Elemental. Elementals eventually became a strong creature type later on in Magic's history. But for the first 10 years, it was just that. Now back to Zombie Master. It's one of the few lords that don't give creatures of its other type +1/+1. Instead, it has Swamp Walk and Regenerate. So a lot of zombie decks, even like Commander zombie decks don't include Zombie Master because it doesn't pump zombies. But if you do want to create a zombie deck, I recommend just at least putting in like one of these in there. If you are playing against a deck with swamps, having unblockable creatures is amazing. We don't see that very often. So that is Mingus. Let's move on to Marvers. Let's see, Jesper Marfers illustrated Armageddon, Bad Moon, Basalt Monolith, Bayou, Camouflage, Conversion, Cursed Land, Demonic Hordes, Fog, Goblin King, Ironroot, Treefolk, Living Lands, Obsidianus Golem, Pestilence, Phantom Monster, Two Plains, Scathed Zombies, Scrubland, Smoke, Tropical Island, erroneously credited to Mark Poole in Alpha, Tundra, Will-O-Wisp, Word of Command. And his Circle of Protection of Black would be in Alpha if it wasn't forgotten. They fixed it in beta. So let's see. Armageddon. This was a mistake in white. Basically, white could destroy any permanent. Disenchant could destroy artifacts and enchantments. Wrath of God could destroy his creatures. Swords of Plowshares destroys creatures. Armageddon destroys lands. So this was, not in white's color. They even reprinted it in Ravages of War. Eventually, Magic the Gathering caught on that destroying all lands is not part of White's color pie. It was a pretty cool sounding card. It kind of goes with White, kind of like how Drain Life went with Black. But Draining Life was a mistake in Black, and destroying all lands is a mistake in White. It was in Erniegeddon early in about 1995, where you could turn 4, play an Urnum Djinn, and give your opponent's creatures Forest Walk, but it wouldn't matter because you would destroy all lands with Armageddon turn 5 and just win the game. There'd be no way for your opponent to go back against an Urnum Djinn because a 4-mana 4/5 was unstoppable back then. It just was. Bad Moon. I got a couple of these from Smedlock and Gen Con. Unfortunately, he never mailed the Bad Moons, so my dad talked to him and eventually gave the 4 Bad Moons back. He just was scammed for thousands of dollars. He had an evil employee who took all the money from the eBay orders and never sent any cards, and quit and took the money and didn't give it to his boss. But he was a kind of nice person about it, and gave us the Bad Moons anyway. I ended up going 8th place in a 48-person tournament and got 6 packs, 9 packs. Got 9 packs. From playing a Suicide Black deck with 4 Bad Moons. So it's kind of like a key card for Black Weenie, and it's fallen out of favor, probably because it doesn't get printed very much. It got printed in Commander 2014. So don't forget about this card if you're playing Mono Black. It's still a strong card. It's kind of weaker than a Goblin King because a Goblin King is a 2/2 body, but enchantments are hard to kill in Magic the Gathering, so when it stays on the board, it'll stick there. Basalt Monolith. Basalt Monolith and Power Artifact made the strong infinite mana combo. Power Artifact for 2 blue. You could make an artifact's activated abilities cost 2 less. And so for 3 mana you could play Basalt Monolith, and for 1 colorless instead of 3 you could untap it, which means you tap it, add 3, untap for 1, tap, add 3, and you would get infinite mana. You could Brain Geyser your opponent for infinity and win the game. It's really easy. The reason why I only saw it once, it's very difficult to find all these 1993, 94 Magic cards. So Power Artifacts is super expensive, but if you want to try it out, it'll work at a Friday Night Magic sort of competition. Bayou, one of the dual lands. The 5 blue dual lands are worth, 4 blue dual lands are worth the most, and the 6 non-blue dual lands are worth less. Bayou is used in the Rock. Camouflage. It was a card an unlimited, and then it stopped. Didn't make it to revised. It's kind of hard to read, and it's just way too many words. I've actually never seen it played, so I'm not going to talk about it. Conversion. There were huge color hosing cards back in Ice Age Block and Revised in 94-95. There's not many, like, completely destroy a color sort of cards these days, but Conversion was one of them, and this was one that's actually sort of fair because it slows you down. But if you played against Mono Red, your opponent should just concede the game. Like Light of Day, if you played it, then Black would concede the game. White hates Red and Black because they're opposing colors in the color wheel. Next up, we got Cursed Land. This is a card that gets played a lot in Chandelar. It's not good enough for constructed play. It's 4 mana is just too much. You can do this with 3 mana. Even in Revise, you can do it with 3 mana with Wanderlust. But if you played against Chandelar, Green-Black would play both Wanderlust and Cursed Land against you and slowly drain out for your life. Next up, Demonic Hordes. They reprinted this, except it doesn't require a 3 black upkeep cost. For 1 mana, it can destroy target land, so if you've clogged the board entirely, you could slowly, over the course of 5 to 10 turns, slowly destroy your opponent's lands one by one, until your opponent is just discarding his cards, and then you would just have the upper advantage, and you'd win sort of like turn 20 or so. But look at this cool art. This is just so fun. These cards aren't worth that much anymore. They're just completely underpowered compared to modern cards. But the art is just amazing. Next is Fog. I used to say "fog you" to my opponents, kind of like the F word, and I didn't get written up for unsportsmanlike conduct. This is just funny. I would always say "fog you." Fog has saved my life. Fog has won me games. Your opponent just does turn 4 overrun, attacks you for 20. You can fog and sort of like counter spells your opponent's overrun for a lethal attack. So in a combo deck, if you just need more time, it's the same thing as a silence. Sometimes it's the same thing as a time walk. If you already have the cards in your hand, and you can build turbo fog decks where you draw multiple cards every single turn, and you just use 1 for a fog, and your opponent can't kill you with creature damage. And most decks can't kill you unless they kill you with creature damage. Most decks aren't infinite fireball, channel fireball decks. So a turbo fog strategy still shows up in standard from time to time. Goblin King. This was a summon lord for the longest time. Somewhere around, I think I said in an earlier video, around 2006, 2005 maybe, they errated a Goblin King to be a summon goblin, and it got even more powerful, and the Odyssey Onslaught block extended goblin decks became even more overpowered with Goblin King being a goblin. It gives goblins Mountain Walk, which I don't see being relevant very often, because if you're playing against Mono Red usually just lightning bolts Goblin King away, being the worst of the goblins. Ironroot Treefolk. I just love this art. I know there's a Treefolk that's at 3/6 for green 4 now, so these stats aren't that good, but I think that this is like the poster boy for Revise's art. It's simplicity. It's being able to recognize what's in a picture so easily, like the split second that you see it. The next up, Living Lands. All forests are 1/1 creatures that are still lands. There's a reason why everyone should have half their basic lands be snow and half their basic lands be normal, because people can play decks like Living Lands, or I think there's like Life, which makes a land into a creature, and then you cast Eradicate, which is for 2 black and 2 colorless. It destroys target non-black creature, and you get to search your opponent's library for all copies of that creature removed from the game. Well, if your opponent has Living Lands, and you eradicate your opponent's lands, and it's a monocolored deck, you can just wipe out every single basic land your opponent has, and your opponent will never have more than 5 lands the entire game. And like a game of Commander, it's absolutely back-breaking. However, it's like a 1 in a million chance you'll find someone playing Living Lands Eradicate combo, so if you've been forgetting up to this point, you're pretty safe. Next is Obsidianus Golem. Not Gollum. Gollum's a creature from Lord of the Rings. It's Golem. I learned that from watching Monster Rancher cartoons. 4/6 for 6 colorless. It's a nice exception. Early on in Magic the Gathering's history, artifact creatures would have sort of like a penalty. Blue was supposed to have the worst creatures of the 5, and if you made excellent artifact creatures, like, I don't know, like a Wurmcoil Engine, then blue would be able to play with Wurmcoil Engine, and then blue would no longer be like the worst color for creatures anymore. So to balance out the color pie, a lot of artifact creatures are kind of meh. One of those is Obsidianus Golem, but there's very few common artifacts early on in Magic the Gathering's history. A lot of artifacts are rare, and most of them are uncommon. So if you have an early collection, you don't have that many rares, you can put a lot of like uncommon and a few common artifacts into your deck and just try to make it work. Especially if you just don't have enough cards to make a monocolored deck, you can be forced to play with a couple of artifacts that you don't like. Pestilence. So here's my warning. Pox. The early ones, it kind of like, it says it's like I do damage to all creatures and players. It's not I, it's the numeral 1. It's kind of hard to read from the card. So it says 1 damage to all creatures or players. They kind of fixed the wording of it in like 4th edition and beyond. And now it makes sense, but the I and the 1 looking alike was just kind of confused me the first time I looked at the card. Pestilence decks are still popular in Pauper. You can have cards like Wall of Hope that allow you to gain life, and then Pestilence can just destroy everything away. If you have like 20 free mana, you can just wipe every single creature away over and over again, except for your walls, which never die because their toughness is too high, and your opponent will go down to 0, and if you have any life gained at all, then your opponent's life total will go down to 0 before you go down to 0. You can Pestilence for like 21, and you'll still be alive. That's the basic. I've played White-Black before. I've played Pestilence before in Creature Feature, and ended up being in the finals. I lost against Goblins. Onslaught Odyssey Block Goblins were just too much for me. It's just too much card draw. There's a special trick to Pestilence. It's the beginning of the end step. You bury Pestilence. That means you destroy it without regenerating it. But the end step isn't actually a single point in time. It's a long point in time. It's just as long as like the pre-attack phase main step or the post-attack main step. So you can like wait until the beginning of the end step where all the triggers for Pestilences would trigger, and then you can destroy your opponent's creatures. And then when you finally untap again, your Pestilence is still there even though there's no creatures in play. You can play your own creature, and Pestilence doesn't die. It's kind of like a pro play. Phantom Monster. I thought this was overpowered when I first saw it. Like I said, blue is supposed to be the worst creatures ever, so being better than Hill Giant is kind of weird. So this is kind of like an overpowered card. And if you look at Mercadian Mask's Sea Zeppelin, it's a 3/3 high flyer. It can only be blocked by, or it can only block creatures with flying. It can't block ground creatures. So they kind of fix it later on. This is kind of like a classic. It's just this evil. It's just a Halloween themed kind of creature, just like chewing your face. A lot of people, ignore these sort of simple creatures. They're seeing a lot of play like Brazen Borrower, being a 3/1 flying for 2 blue and 1 colorless, is actually just a good card. Just these sort of evasion abilities. You can fly over your opponents and they can't block you. So it's kind of quasi unblockable. And you can use, like I said with Merfolk, the Pearl Trident, you can use Sunken Cities to try to make it a little bit better. So where are we? Some planes. Yep, they're pretty. I think revised planes are the best. I like all revised lands. I think they're beautiful. Scathe Zombies. I could just say my name, Scathe Zombies, just for today. They groan, they moan, they all up bros, and choke, no move their eyes. The classic zombie. It's a bear for 3 mana. The reason why it's worse than Grizzly Bears is because green is the best for creatures. And it gets boosted by Zombie Master. I'll get into that later. Scrubland. It's another non-blue dual land.
The art's just nice. They just didn't have the money to make really fancy art. They didn't pay the artists very much for alpha cards. That's why you have this very basic art. But it's kind of nice. Like I said, it makes it easier to identify the cards. Smoke. Smoke is a card. I think people have completely forgotten that this was a card that ever existed. If you're going to be attacked by creatures over and over again, you can just smoke and make it so your opponent players can't untap more than one creature during his or her untap steps. What's good is back then creatures were underpowered, so you actually had to be hit with a creature several times in order to die. It's not like today we can just have a 6/6 creature for 4 mana. So smoke was a lot more powerful back in the day. It's a rare. It was kind of hard to get multiples of them because they were like in revised, which only sold like 100 million cards. So I didn't face many smoke decks. You will face in Chandelier 2009 or 2010 if you see my videos on them. Let's see, Tropical Island, erroneously credited to Mark Poole and Alpha. This one is really expensive. Tropical Island was like a central card in Gush decks, like in Miracle Grow decks, because you could tap it for a green and play Korean Dryad, and then you could return it to your hand since it's an island with Gush. And it's like was only one of the few cards that did that in Korean Dryad decks. This is probably one of the most powerful meta decks ever faced against in a casual format. Someone had a meta Miracle Grow deck in like a Sunday Magic like casual game, just threw it in, and I was absolutely torn apart. Let's see what else we have. Tundra. I think this is like second most expensive, next to Underground Sea. White being the most powerful color. Blue being the most powerful color in Magic, and white being the third most powerful color in Magic. Being able to use Swords of Plowshares and Counterspell in the same deck really required me having like 4 Tundras. Will-O-Wisp. It took me like a long time to realize that fairy tales, what a fairy was. I always thought a fairy was a sprite, but a fairy tale is like anything in a fairy tale. Like a brownie is a fairy, like a Will-O-Wisp is a fairy, a sprite is a fairy. They're all fairy tale. Any monster in the fairy tale book is a fairy. So these are technically fairies, as I understand it. I bought a couple of these in Canada, and they're generous enough to look it up in Scry magazine, and they thought the prices in Scry magazine was in Canadian money, not American money, so I saved like 20% on my Will-O-Wisps. They're kind of hard to get 4 of, they're like rares. But if you can do first turn Will-O-Wisp, second turn Unholy Strength, Unholy Strength, third turn, an Unholy Strength, your opponent's just dead. It's a 6/4 flying on turn 3. It's like a 4/3 flying on turn 2. And your opponent can just die. Just flat out die. It's got flying, so it's got evasion. What does your opponent can do? You can regenerate. It's just, it's immortal. Will-O-Wisp, Unholy Strength is just evil. Same thing with Ornithopter and Holy Strength. Word of Command, someone drove all the way to Toronto, like 4 or 5 hours for some Words to Commands, and I actually saw it cast on me several times. The problem with Word of Command is like it kind of stops the game for like 3 minutes as someone tries to like read the card. Basically, it just gain control of a single card in your opponent's hand and choose the targets. That's kind of all it does. It's really hard to judge the power level since I've only had one person play it against me, and there's just so few copies of this that exist. Circle Protection Black is not an alpha, so he's not there.
Friends, Wall of Ice Cream has a Facebook page. Check it out and send your fan mail to Gmail or ideas for new content. And see my previous videos at Udioshlet. Not Wall of Ice Cream yet. Getting to 100 subscribers and I'll change it to Wall of Ice Cream. Or you can come play with me on PlayStation. My username's Wall of Ice Cream, and see me on Twitch, Wall of Ice Cream. I might be there on Sundays. Thanks for watching.